We have intervened on several occasions, made contact with parents. One of those cases most recently involved a young girl, a junior high age student in our district that was communicating with what she thought was a teenager in the state of Texas. It turned out that it was a 30-some-odd-year-old man who was preparing to travel to Missouri to make contact with her. How many of you have children in the home that utilize those smart devices? Again, everyone raises their hand. How many of you would allow a known sex offender into your home with your child? Not a hand went up. We wouldn't allow that. Well, how many of you allow your child in a bedroom behind a locked door with a smart device?
In Houston, about a couple months ago, probably, I was on Snapchat, and on the Snap Map, which if anybody's listening, they need to make sure that their child has that turned off, because it shows anyone, even people, their exact location.
Right.
And I clicked on it, and it shows kind of community public stories, posts that people make. And someone had tagged a Christian school right next to my apartment, with his gun tucked into his pants.
I think the innocence of social media has been taken away. Brock, we don't put our kids in a vehicle and say, go drive the car, right? We teach them how to utilize that and how to be safe in an effective manner. And so I think it's important that if we give our child a device, an electronic device, that we teach them how to be responsible and how to use that device.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Brock Murphy with Parent Protech. We're really excited to have Captain Mark Deeds with us today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be here, Brock.
Yes, sir. And so just for everyone to know, as we hop into our conversation today, Captain Mark Deeds is it 36 year?
36 years. Yes.
Awesome. 36-year veteran of law enforcement. Worked in areas of patrol, narcotics, special investigations, crimes against children, crimes against the elderly. I mean, I'm sure we'll dive into more of that here in a little bit. You've been a school resource officer since 2010, I believe.
That is correct.
And then one thing, I know you're not going to brag on yourself, but I wanted to brag on you real quick, that in 2022, the Missouri School Boards Association Center for Education Safety gave you the Heroes Among Us Award. And so huge congratulations on that.
Thank you. I was honored to receive that.
Yes, sir. Very, very well deserved. And you and I got to know each other, I guess it was January of 2023. So grateful for all the conversations we've had so far, and know that the school administrators, the teachers, the families that we have at Parent Protech are going to be excited to hear from your experiences and learn from your experiences. And then I know you're a dad, a husband, a barbecue competitor, and would love for as we dive into the conversation to touch on that point too. But would love to kind of kick it off with, if you want to run through your experiences in a little bit more detail, and give us a kind of a bit of a introduction on your journey.
Great, thanks. Well, as you stated, I'm a 36-year veteran of law enforcement, and I've worked in various fields of law enforcement throughout my career. You touched on one area that was very kind of a trying time, but yet a very grateful time for myself, and that was working in areas of child crimes. That was a field that I didn't think I would ever go into or venture into, but it was very rewarding. I worked 4 years. I supervised our crimes against children unit, and I saw the need for law enforcement in that area for the protection of our children. And that probably was a springboard for me to get into and becoming a school resource officer. I felt the need of protecting children, being there for our youth. They're our leaders of tomorrow. And so I continued my journey after my retirement from a larger city police department. And here I am today, working in the schools, working with children, and it's been very, very rewarding.
I love it. I love it. And I'm sure throughout the 36 years that there's kind of been an evolution of the role of technology, both from a law enforcement point of view, but also from the school resource officer point of view. Can you touch on kind of some of those trends that you've seen over the years kind of change?
Absolutely. One of the biggest evolutions of technology that I saw in my career has been the cell phone. I'm dating myself, but 36 years ago, we had pay phones, and we didn't have phones in our cars or phones in our pockets. And we didn't have instant contact with the outside world. You had to go to a payphone. And then along came social media and the access to the internet and the World Wide Web. And so we went from literally putting a quarter in a phone to call your buddy or your spouse or whoever, to we pick up the phone now and we can call across the world and send photographs, or we can FaceTime, or we can access things in real time and have instant gratification right there, what we want, whether it be the news, whether it be sports, whether it be a good recipe to barbecue with, or as we both know, pornography or child pornography. And so it's while it's been, in my opinion, it's a double-edged sword. There's good and bad with that, and that's the world we're living in today.
Absolutely. Now, and I always joke with my mom and dad that when they were in school, they had to use smoke signals to communicate back and forth. They roll their eyes, and I know they're ready for me to leave town. I'm visiting them right now, but can you highlight some more kind of some of the things that you've seen come from this unbridled access to technology, different examples of what you've seen?
Absolutely. I would say in where I work in the schools today, I've seen a significant increase in mental health issues, whether that be self-harm, cutting, suicidal ideologies, depression, cyberbullying, sextortion, sexting. These are all the things that we deal with on a daily basis. Not to mention, we often deal with kids who have made contact, whether it be in a chat room or over social media, with an unknown person. And it's not uncommon for us to get information from their friends that they are preparing to leave town or preparing to go meet an unknown person to leave town and to run away. And we have intervened on several occasions, made contact with parents. One of those cases most recently involved a young girl, a junior high age student in our district, that was communicating with what she thought was a teenager in the state of Texas. It turned out that it was a 30-some-odd-year-old man who was preparing to travel to Missouri to make contact with her. And we were able to make contact with the mother, and she intervened. And who knows what would have happened had her friends not came forward.
Wow. And how did she meet? Can you share like what app or device?
So I think it was through Snapchat is how they met. And again, online, a device in her hand, probably either at school, at home, in her bedroom, who knows? I don't know that we ever determined where she was physically when she made that connection. But she'd been communicating with this person for 2 or 3 months. In my opinion, it was a classic example of a child being groomed by a child predator. And it checked all the boxes once we started looking into this.
Wow. Well, and I think it's easy for families to kind of think of the myths that like, oh, my child would never, or we live in the nicest neighborhood, go to the nicest school,
Right.
they would never do that. What would you tell to a parent who kind of has that point of view on the list of issues that can easily pop up nowadays?
Well, number one, I think we have to take our heads out of the sand and be realistic here as to who your child could be communicating with. I'll give an example. I've never forgot this. Several years ago, I was at a training conference, and the instructor asked, how many of you in here are parents? Well, the majority of us raised our hands. How many of you have computers or smart devices in your home? Just everyone raised their hand again. How many of you have children in the home that utilize those smart devices? Again, everyone raises their hand. How many of you would allow a known sex offender into your home with your child? Not a hand went up. We wouldn't allow that. Well, how many of you allow your child in a bedroom behind a locked door with a smart device? Well, what the point was he was making is that predator or potential child molester or unknown person is in your child's bedroom with your child over an electronic device. So once again, I tell parents all the time that you have to monitor your child's social media use and know who they're communicating with. And you have to know what apps they're using and the social media platforms. I think that's critical, because if not, you're allowing your child to be accessible to the unknown people. And you've heard me say this before, but I say it all the time, that child predators are one click away.
And I think part of the fear of a parent like taking their kid's phone and kind of having these conversations, they don't know how their child's going to react.
Well, yeah, because we've all become so dependent upon our phones and those electronic devices. And I think that even during COVID, when children were not seated in schools and schools were closed, that was their connection to the outside world. So I think the use and misuse of electronic devices grew since COVID, because they become dependent upon those electronic devices.
Definitely. No, and I'm always shocked every Sunday morning when I get the Apple, how much time you spend on your phone each week. And it's easy to lose track of that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of a good kind of pivot into more of the mental health impacts. And I know we were texting back and forth about the U.S. Surgeon General's health advisory on social media and youth mental health, with shocking stats, like children who spend over, I guess it was 3.5 hours in front of on social media each day have double the risk of depression and anxiety. Girls that turn 13 that spend over 2.5 hours in front of a screen on social media each day are at a much higher risk of suicide than young adults.
Right.
How do you think I know it kind of ties in to what you've already said, but how do you think we combat that with kind of that addiction, and with so many people being hooked on the likes and the phones and the notifications and all of these that are built in to leave us wanting to come back?
Well, in that report, the Surgeon General wrote that the increase in youth mental health needs today is the defining public health crisis of our times. And that should send a clear message that we have to do something to combat that. I think a lot of this starts at home. And I think we have to rely upon the parents to be parents. And along with that, you may have to incorporate or implement in the home, a tech-free zone. You leave your devices at a certain location. Maybe you gather at the dinner table and it be device-free. It's funny, I go out in the public, I'm in the public all the time, and even in our lunchrooms in our schools, I see kids on their phones. And I see families at dinner at restaurants, and they're all texting and they're not having family time. It's all centers around those devices. And again, one way to combat that is, I think it's important that the parents set an example, and the kids hopefully follow that. It's, Brock, we don't put our kids in a vehicle and say, go drive the car, right? We teach them how to utilize that and how to be safe in an effective manner and how to be good drivers on the roadway. And so I think it's important that if we give our child a device, an electronic device, that we teach them how to be responsible and how to use that device. And I think it's important that we teach them the aspect of technology, the good, the bad, the indifferent, and we have conversations about how these can be addictive, how it can be dangerous. And, I see kids having smartphones as early as 8, 9 years old. And I don't think we're doing our kids any favors, giving them that technology that early, if we're not going to teach them how to use it responsibly.
The leading by example is such a strong piece. And even quick story, I was in Illinois for a wedding. I think we talked when I was in Illinois.
Right.
And one morning all the groomsmen got Cracker Barrel, and we were all sitting at the table. Not a phone was on the table, no phones were out, and we had multiple people stop by and say it's so good to see like young men
Enjoy their time.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's been ringing, like, I think of that so much since that happened, just because it's easy to check your emails or
well, it's became a way of life. And I'm not indifferent from that. I'm bad about that myself. I'm a news junkie. I want to know about the weather. I'm in the fall. I want to know about my Chiefs, how they're doing, and the latest news on football. So I'm no different. But I don't do social media.
Yeah. Well, and so a newer development that Parent Protect has been working on has been getting information out to schools and families about kind of how to prevent violence at school, how to prevent terroristic threats.
Right.
And just kind of communicating with people that what you do at school and online impacts people.
Right.
And would you have any advice for more parents and school administrators? And I'll just clarify again that this conversation is your personal views and not the official statements from who you're officially affiliated with.
Right.
But what advice would you give for parents? Because I know the safety of children when they're at school after tragic events is on the minds of so many people. But what would you say to that?
Well, first of all, let me say that when I was growing up, that we did not have social media, and if you got into a scuffle at school or a disagreement at school, you could go home and cool off or have the weekend and not have to deal with that student. Now, with everyone having devices, the technology keeps this issue spun up, and it's 24/7, so it can be never ending. Once they leave the school building, it continues beyond. If they get into a situation over the weekend, it continues back onto our school property on Monday morning. So, but back to your original question, again, I think parents and teachers alike have to be vigilant in monitoring what these kids are doing, what they're doing online. Most districts have technology in place if they're on a school device it can catch keywords, and it can, we're notified if it appears to be a criminal matter. But a lot of the terroristic threats that we have worked, or the threats at school, the threats online, cyberbullying, a lot of those things begin with the device itself, whether it be at home or at school. And we take those very seriously. Again, I think parents have to monitor their kids' activity. They have to understand the technology that their kids have access to. Our teachers and administrators in the district I work in are very good about monitoring kids' behavior. If these kids are in a classroom, they're going to know what their day-to-day demeanor is. And if something is off, we look into that. We have social workers on staff, we have counselors, and we try to get them some help, or at least have a conversation with them. I think long-term, some of these social media platform companies need to be held a little bit more responsible. Everybody wants a slice of the pie when it comes to technology, and that equates to dollars and cents and making money. But at some point, I think we have to evaluate the impact it's having on our youth today.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, and I'm not sure I've told you, but the need for these companies to cooperate with law enforcement needs to be a lot better, because in Houston, about a couple months ago, probably, I was on Snapchat kind of messing around, and on the Snap Map, which, if anybody's listening, they need to make sure that their child has that turned off, because it shows anyone, even people, their exact location.
Right.
And I clicked on it, and it shows kind of community public stories, posts that people make. And someone had tagged a school, a Christian school right next to my apartment, with his gun tucked into his pants. And it was 2 days after the horrific events that happened in Nashville.
Oh, right.
And so obviously, it's one, shouldn't even joke about tagging a Christian school, having a gun a few hours before school even begins. But two, I went and talked to the security team at that school, and they said, like, we would love to reach out to Snapchat and try to recover some of the information about who posted that, but they would never in a million years cooperate and help. And even I reported it, but it got automatically did not violate community guidelines, even though it's obviously a threat or a horrible joke,
right?
Threatening the lives of kids. And so completely echo the feeling that there needs to be a little bit more accountability there.
Right.
But also Snapchat, the founder of it, one of the founders, he created the platform because he wanted to send pictures to girls that disappeared. And so I think part of it is you have to look at what the purpose, even from the beginning of, was for that platform that so many kids are using nowadays.
We see that a lot. We catch wind in the schools of wrongdoing and potential criminal activity. And a lot of things are facilitated over Snapchat now. We know that there are a lot of drug deals that are facilitated over Snapchat. And again, we get the sexting cases where nude photos are sent and over Snapchat, and you don't recover those. And so I agree with you totally. It's often very difficult to work with some of these social media platforms. I often say this. I think the innocence of social media has been taken away. I wonder from some of these creators what their intentions were when they come up with this social platform. Much like Facebook or anything else, for me, I would think that, those are out there to keep up with family members, keep up with long lost friends, your friends, but there is so much criminal intent now they use the platforms to facilitate their own criminal intent with, and it's kind of frustrating at times.
No doubt. No doubt. And one thing real quick, can you highlight the role of the bystander in kind of preventing violence at school, the importance of people that hear things to step forward?
Oh, in my role, I talk to a lot of administrators and staff and students, and the main thing I always say is, if you see something, say something. And, if it does not appear to be the way it should be, notify someone, notify a staff member, an administrator, a principal, school police, or whoever, but please notify someone. And, you referenced the Nashville shooting earlier at the school. It's proven in any given shooting situation, there is what we call leakage. And that is, someone knew about that shooting prior to it occurring. And a lot of these people talk about on social media. And, we work threats quite often where people are talking about shooting up a school or whatever. And we have people come forward, students that have seen this. And we always appreciate that. And because we constantly want to prevent any violence, of course. But so I would say, hey, if you're seeing something online and it appears to be a threat or of some sort, whether it be to an institution, a school, or to someone else, notify law enforcement. And we want to know those things, and we work through all those.
No, I know it's so serious and in such a important role that especially kids can be scared on whether, if they stand up and tell the teacher, the counselor, whoever, that they're going to lose a friend, or then that friend's going to do something to them. And I know we touched it, but what would you say is one of the biggest hurdles trying to add perspective to families on the type of issues that their students are going through? What do you think the biggest hurdle is going forward for kids from an educational standpoint, but also kind of how they're, because we're still going through evolution when it comes to social media and platforms adding new features. What perspective would you add there on kind of what parents can do as these platforms change and new features come online, and kind of understand the social pressures that kids have at school?
Well, I would say that, again, parents need to be involved and monitor their activity and what they're doing. But I would say that you need to set boundaries, set boundaries of what you're posting. Be cautious to the point of not posting too much personal information. The thing about social media is people can hide behind keyboards and say really great things or really bad things to people. And we all want to be accepted and acknowledged, and you want to hear all the good things, but there's so much negativity out there. And I would say, if you're a parent and your child's being bullied, your child doesn't need to be in contact with that person. Don't accept them as a friend, unfriend them, don't follow them, don't let them follow you, and don't subject yourself to negativity. Because oftentimes we see that this negativity leads to depression, anxiety, self-harm, again, suicidal thoughts. And we talk to a lot of these kids, and they say, oh yeah, it's because so-and-so unfriended me, or they said something negative to me, or they told me to go kill myself. And, as a parent, I would maybe even take that device away for a period of time. And then follow up with, whether it be a medical doctor or your primary care physician or something, to address any of those issues that your child may have.
That's great advice. No, and I kind of want to start wrapping it up. I know you've got a busy day. Sometimes I feel like, especially for parents, that this is a thankless job. Their child's never going to say, thank you for taking my phone away, or thank you for
Right.
setting restrictions. What kind of encouragement would you have for them as they navigate kind of this muddy water that could jeopardize or kind of put a spin on their relationship with their child at that current time?
Well, I'll speak as a parent. As a parent, I raised two kids, and they're in their mid and late 20s now, and but they had access to all of this social media stuff in high school and growing up. And I don't know that I did the right thing as a parent, because I wasn't aware of social media like I'm aware of it now when they were growing up. And again, it was evolving. But I would say be a parent first. That's your responsibility. That's what we signed up to do, is to be a parent. And if that means removing that device for his or her protection, then we have to do that. But I would also say you could reach a happy medium there if you're well versed on the social media platforms that are out there. And I'm going to give Parent Protect a plug here, that if you opt into this program that you have, and I've looked at it and I'm a fan of it, that you can learn about social media and keep your child safe while they're using it.
Thank you. Now, and I'm not sure if you saw the newsletter that we just pushed out, but trying to even give little tidbits of information for families, because I know you're busy. I know so many parents are juggling a million different things. And so
Right.
trying to make it as easy as possible for people to get that good information. Are there any final thoughts from you on for parents, for educators, for policymakers?
Well, you know, I would say that we're all in this together. You know, my goal is keeping kids safe. I think ultimately that's your company and yourself. That's your goal. But you know, when we signed up to do this, you know, we're kind of one big community. We're one village, and you know, we got to look out for the best interest of the kids. And I think we're in the educational field, right? So we need to educate families, and we need to educate kids on how to use smart devices in a smart way and keep yourself safe.
Love it. Love it. And I think from me at Parent Protect and all of our listeners, you know, I know you are often not thanked enough for everything you do and have done, and your entire team has done to keep kids safe. And I know the passion and the drive and every ounce of your being is revolved around keeping them safe, keeping people safe. And so we just want to make sure that you know how much we're grateful for you, and I'm grateful for our conversations and having this open dialogue, but just want you to know that.
Thank you very much, Brock. I appreciate that greatly.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for joining us.
Hey, I was glad to be here. Thanks for having me.